Welcome back to Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast. LR here with Benji for the European Championships men's road race recap, as well as the Tour of Scandinavia roundup, the Women's World Tour race that finished today as well. But as always, this show is brought to you by Zwift. Tom Pidcock is heading to Zwift tomorrow to relive his heroics on Stage 12, the afterworld stage of this year's Tour de France, and he wants you to join him and hundreds of other Zwifters. It's a social ride, and he's riding up the Alpe d'Huez Zwift. So, it'll be as hard as you want to make it. He's riding at 6 p.m. British Standard Time and 7 p.m. European Time. I had some concerned listeners call in and say, Ella, there is no such thing as British Summer Time. But Tom at Zwift said BST, 6 p.m. BST, and I get poetic license with the Zwift read. So I'm saying it's British summertime. I've forgotten what I said. British summertime tomorrow, 6 p.m. if you're in the UK. US will obviously be a bit earlier, depending on where you are, East Coast, West Coast. And Australians, not a great time, but maybe if you want to get up early.
Wait,
anyway, sign up.
I need to correct it. I think you said British Standard Time, and I think British Summertime is the real one. I think that's the real deal here.
Which one is it? Which one actually
British
exists?
Summertime is existing, I think.
All right. We'll see about that. Anyway, well, someone will know. So if you want to head to Zwift, you can go to Zwift.com for free 7-day trial, or sign up to the event if you're already on Zwift via the link in the description down below. It should be a good one, fun one. And yeah, it's good to see Tom Pidcock on Zwift. But anyway, European champs, it was a sprint parcours. Last year was the Evenepoel trying to attack but couldn't get rid of Colbrelli. It was actually a really good race. Had like Pogacar, Hirschi in good shape. Cosnefroy, really nice race. This year, as I said, sprint stage. Yeah, there was a couple of climbs early, but it was in Germany and it's just finishing on a circuit, flat one in Munich with something that looked like the Arc de Triomphe, a big turn in with 1 kilometer to go, like a huge sweeping 180-degree turn, which would prove decisive, at least I think. But who we have here, Merlier for Belgium, no Philipsen, Jacobsen for the Netherlands. Italy have brought a few sprinters, Milan, Mozzato, Viviani, Dainese. France had Demar, they'd ride for, even though they have Lecoq and Hofstede. Mercus here, but didn't have a sprinter. And they were the main favourites. I mean, Germany home race had Ackermann, Bauhaus, and Co. And yeah, they were the main riders. Bennett as well, I guess here. But it was one of these interesting races, Benji, where you see all these different riders thrown together, no training, probably no prep, never done a lead up together, mainly outside of national events. And you see how they, like, for example, first one, there's a break. I think Switzerland's represented. Belgium using Dries de Bont as brake control rather than 1,600 to go. Like, that sort of thing was surprising to me when I think a shoulder race last year with Merlier or whoever it was, Philipsen, he did their 600-meter punch.
Exactly. It's true. And that's the intriguing aspect here. Like, a team like Belgium might show up with 3 riders that at their original trade team do the same exact role in a sprint train. I think Dries van Gestel has also done sprint leadouts for a team of Total back in the day as well, for Bonifacio, I think, if I recall correctly. But is that the same as Dries de Bont's quality at Alpecin, for example? I'd say on paper, no. But it's intriguing to see how these national coaches would put these riders together and get something going like that. You did mention Switzerland in the breakaway, a vital aspect, because it's like the one team that doesn't really have a sprinter here and the one team that would eventually try and get away before the actual final sprint with Stefan Bissiger in some white corner. He goes on the left side, gets a bit of a gap, but there's 75 teams in this race that are going to try and win the sprint here. So obviously that Bissiger move is not going to make anything happen here. But we often saw Slovenia at the front of the peloton. Do they have Mezgec here, or how they seemed very willing to control stuff?
Jakob Primožič.
That's next level. It's Primoz.
It's a 23-year-old sprinter version of Primoz. I don't know. It's just trying to nick at the front. Mezgec looked like their only option. Novak, not suited to this course. One of the other big riders here that they have. And to be honest, it was coming down to a sprint. Like France were from 10Ks to go using a lot of resources to control. There were narrow sections on this circuit. Ackermann even crashed into I think a barrier at one point, so he wasn't able to contest the sprint. Bauhaus was in the sprint, but was nowhere eventually. And France controlling. Demar wanting to be kept safe. His lead out last man normally is over on the other side at Italy. And we were thinking, who are they going for? It was Dainese that Italy would go for. So Bisker brought back, and shuffling. Netherlands were keeping with Van Enden and Hoel and Eekhoff, particularly Eekhoff. In the last 3 kilometers, were keeping them safe. But then it kind of be Van Poppel and Jacobsen surfing, like we've seen Van Poppel doing a lot this year himself. And Italy, they come forward, 1500. They've got Dainese, who he won a Giro stage, but he's just not the all-out burner that a Demar, Jacobsen, Merlier is. He sort of has to profit off the draft, come late, wait for someone to go too early, make a mistake. They're going for him, Benji. And Ganna does a huge lead out to that 1K big turn. I thought for sure they were going to lose the wheel. You could almost get a 25-meter gap, Trentin could have, if you lost the wheel there, because they almost did inadvertently, but then they just stuck to the plan. I was surprised no team tried that tactic with Jacobsen here.
Exactly. That's also an aspect here that I found very intriguing looking at the corner in action. And I will say when it comes to Italy, I kind of had a feeling that they weren't going all out for Dainese. I felt like I never believed in any way that Viviani would actually do a lead out for Dainese. I think they were trying to position both of those riders and sprint with both riders in the end and then see where both will end. Kind of the 1T Tour de France strategy of 2-3 years ago where they had 2 riders sprinting at the same time. That kind of thing is what I expected for Italy to happen. Because again, Viviani doing a lead out, not fucking happening in a race like this. And you mentioned the corner. They go into this corner. Ganna's he has done that significant pull. He's kind of pulling off, going into the corner, while Trentin takes the inner corner around him, and therefore he pushes ahead of him. But Ganna decides to, like you mentioned, not open up the gap, the opposite of the strategy you propose, and basically sits on the wheel of Trentin to hold the train together behind the corner to keep that train going. Again, what if Ganna lets the gap go? What if Ganna says, okay, I won't take the wheel here of Trentin. Let's see what other teams take control here and take that wheel. Do you think they made a mistake not giving Trentin a try at 1K to go after that corner?
I swear Trentin is always kind of good racing for Italy. World Champs 2019, European Championships, maybe the one Nizzolo won. I can't remember. In a circuit course. I always remember him being pretty solid, and he was really, really good today. And Italy looked great until it turned into a bit of a disaster where they have about 5 riders. It's 800 meters to go. And I'm like, okay, we should probably start cycling through the riders here. Ganna, who's slotted behind Trentin, Ganna's great track rider, great time trial rider. Does he know what he's doing in a lead out? Maybe not. He doesn't really have to do it very often. Like in a proper pure sprint stage, he's not asked to do that often at Ineos. But slotting in behind Trentin when he isn't able to take a further pull, and then Trentin pulls off and he pulls off, he's probably not what you'd want ordinarily. You normally just pull off afterwards, doing his pull and not getting in the way. Guarnieri's next, the last man normally for FDJ. And I don't know if the corner cooked him, the big sweeper where you have to accelerate late. I don't know. But honestly, he couldn't pull. He was in the wind for about 3-4 seconds, but during that time, Edward Turns for Belgium has just come up the side. So Guarnieri was going nowhere. And, okay, we'll talk about lead-out man in a second. Finish the recap. Turns goes, Merlier jumps early. Van Poppel slots onto Merlier's wheel. He's got Jacobsen in his wheel. He then sprints to the right-hand side of Merlier, tries to overlap, leaves a pocket behind Merlier. Jacobsen sprints into the pocket and just absolutely destroys everybody with Demar sprinting off his wheel. So Jacobsen, too fast. Merlier maybe jumps a little bit early. Demar comes late and comes second. Merlier third, Van Poppel fourth in the photo, beats his normal sprinter, Sam Bennett, who came fifth. Mezgec sixth. Viviani, as Benji said, wasn't there to do lead-out duties. He came seventh. Christoph eighth. Aberasturi ninth. Pedersen 10th. Dainese 11th. And Bauhaus all the way down in 18. So, yeah. Jakobsen takes on the European Champs jersey, Benji, avenges Remco last year, and I mean, him with Van Poppel is just like, he just looked unstoppable today.
What is amazing to me is that when the European Champ starts, I say to myself, I want every single person in this race that has a national champions jersey on his shoulders to lose this race, because otherwise we never see the national champions jersey the entire year through. So I was rooting against Belgium, let's be honest about it, because if Merlier wins, we don't see a Belgian national championships jersey for the entire year, and that's not something I want to see happen. We had it with Nizzolo, we had it with Colbrelli, and having it with Merlier, I was not okay with that. So having Jakobsen in this race, the fastest sprinter on paper at the start here, he was going to be the significant favorite when they went to the line. Van Poppel is indeed a good lead out. And in this specific situation, like, when I saw the lead out initially, I was like, what has Van Poppel done here? He kept the wheel of Merlier, and then Jakobsen kind of sprints out of the wheel. But you've got a better take on that, right?
Well, for starters, he's navigating Jakobsen to get into that position in the first place. I haven't seen a helicopter shot from the arch. I'm not sure if it exists. And if you focus in on Van Poppel, I presume he's in front of Jakobsen, navigating Jakobsen to be in the right position, which is on Merlier. We know Merlier might jump early, and he's probably the second fastest pure sprinter here. So he's doing that for starters, which is almost the most important job. Like, if he pulls off before the sprint even starts, but he's put Jakobsen on Merlier's wheel, Jakobsen's still going to win anyway. Yeah, he still wins anyway. Maybe Demar pushes him from the draft. Probably not. But then what he does as well is, and he's done this a lot, because Van Poppel is decent sprinter in his own right, he will then do his full max sprint and kind of slingshot his sprinter into Merlier's draft whilst Merlier's going early. So his other option is kind of just stay in the draft of Merlier for as long as possible, and then pull off and then be burnt. And then Jakobsen's kind of at a point of deceleration or not accelerating, and has to accelerate into a gap that, rather than being dragged into it. It's hard to explain. But yeah, maybe I'm imagining it, but I think he did a really good job of that, pushing Jakobsen into that pocket, and then Jakobsen does the rest. I mean, Jakobsen probably winning anyway. But I think it is interesting with Van Poppel. Like, I think at UAE Tour, maybe the first or second sprint stage, I said, holy shit, Bora Hansgrohe have got this right in a big way with Danny Van Poppel. Some of the lead-outs Van Poppel was doing in lead-out tour was like better than what Merku did for Bennett in 2021 UAE, with a lot of pure sprint stages. And then it's continued. And then Eschborn, I don't know where he came. That was where Bennett has won a race this year. I think like the lead out from Van Poppel, he came fifth there. Like, he's finishing late in these stages.
Yeah.
But an interesting signing in that he was kind of a classicsy sprinter himself under, he's just turned 29. It's the opposite end of the spectrum, Benji, to Lotto signing Guarnieri on I think a 2-year, who's 34, has been a last man for a long time, and on paper has the experience as a last man, but I'm not convinced Jonathan Milan, the 20-something-year-old at Bahrain, with the right coaching, couldn't be a better last man than Guarnieri next year, even though, like, if you're Jonathan Milan, he could be a good sprinter in his own right. He's a decent sprinter, but like, he's never going to be a top sprinter, famous last words.
Yeah.
Is it better to try and convert someone earlier when they're still a decent sprinter than go with a tried and tested lead out who might actually be on the tail end of their career?
That's a very good question. We often also see next to that, we talk about Milan here in this specific scenario, Merku, now Quickstep is trying with Pedersen. These riders all seem to have a history when it comes to track. Is there a correlation with how good a lead out can be with their history on the track cycling? discipline, for example. That's also something very intriguing to my personal opinion. But you were certainly right that it seems to be different to how teams approach which leadouts they sign. And with Guarnieri, in my opinion, last year he was the weaker link on, well, this year he was the weaker link on Groupama when it comes to the leadout. Today he was the weaker link as well when it comes to Italy in that leadout. Yes, we spoke about Ganna slotting into the wheel of Trentin, and that certainly has an impact on the lead out of the Italians today, because two riders going off the front at the same time means that your third rider is next to the other riders instead of ahead of them when going forward from that point onwards. So small difference there, but again, a 4-second pull, I think, is what I counted when it comes to Guarnieri. Yes, that corner might have cooked him, like you mentioned, but that's not the lead out you're looking for in a rider.
There's corners in sprints.
Yeah, exactly. And there's going to be more corners and sprints in the future because, the UCI tends to have a lot of corners in the last kilometer of sprint stages. But when it comes to
it's possible also Ganna fucked him over. That's maybe played in a little bit, but he looked kind of cooked in the wheel.
Yeah. I'm not 100% on board with the Ganna fucked him over situation. I feel like the speed gradually went up from that corner. Now, we did see, for example, the team of Belgium also doing a lead out here with Van Lerberg. And he's a rider that I've also had criticism on when it comes to his lead outs in the past. As he always, it was always not 100% perfect. And you kind of need 100% perfect lead outs if you want to drop your sprinter off at the right time to make sure they win. Today, Van Lerberg brings the Belgian sprinter Merlier to a situation where he has to launch early. Is that because Van Lerberg... Wow, I ruined that name and I'm Belgian.
Can't even say it.
Good old Bert was at the front. And
I always call him Bert.
Well, Teuns was on the front before Bert was on the front. And is that because Teuns went off too early, that Van Lerberg had to off too early as well?
Oh, Teuns was good. I thought Teuns was good.
Was he too strong that he burned Van Lerberg?
I mean, if you get cooked on the wheel at 65 k's an hour on the flat as a last man, then you're not a good last man. Like, that's literally the job description, is to hold the wheel and then be able to do a 300-meter pull or 250-meter pull after sitting in that wheel. Like, that is the job. But yeah, like, Bert ain't it. I'm sorry to say. Quickstep, I've been trying to make Bert be a leader man. I don't see it personally. But anyway, I think they'll keep trying. They even extended him. It is, as someone who tries to quantify things in cycling a little bit, lead outs and classics, but lead outs is really, really difficult to do. Yeah. Like the Giro Demar, this Giro where Demar was back, what percentage of that is Demar is on better shape than last year? What percentage of that is Sinkeldam and Scottson setting them up really well? What percentage of it is Guarnieri? I don't know. It's really hard to quantify that, especially if you don't have all their power files for the entire race. It's really, really difficult. I would say it's something people need to be aware of. And I think Dowsett said this before, where like, just because the sprinter doesn't finish it off because the sprinter's not good enough to win doesn't mean the lead out was bad. Now, that also applies in reverse. Jakobsen's won a lot of races this year with no lead out. So that also applies in reverse. But for example, like Guarnieri, is he better than Dan McClay because Arnaud Demar is better than Nasser Bouhanni? I would say no. I would say Dan McClay is 5 years younger, I think, and is often doing a lot of it himself. And it's just Demar's better than Bouhanni. And McClay gets around classic circuits better. But Guarnieri seems to be hotter on the market. Now, maybe Archaea extend McClay and what I'm talking is relevant. But that's just something to bear in mind. And I think it's really, really hard to quantify last men and their impact.
I think there's also the aspect that your perfect lead out, the blueprint of your perfect lead out, also depends on the blueprint of the sprinter. There are different types of sprinters. Caleb Ewan is not the bulkiest of sprinters, can't push his way through a sprint in the same way that Merlier did. We saw that in the Benelux Tour 2020, for example, where they were riding against each other and Merlier took the upper hand in those sprints because Ewan couldn't move forward in those sprints, didn't have that maneuverability, true riders in the same way that Merlier did. While a Ewan does have that kick on an uphill sprint, for example, but that's not really relevant to the lead out here. I just want to say that when it comes to Caleb Ewan, I feel like Lotto is looking for a sprint train for Caleb Ewan, and I feel like what they should be looking for is a pilot.
Yeah, I think they tried that with Du Bois, right? And one of the sprints in the Giro they got right was where they had the guy serve his back wheel and front wheel. But it is curious to me that, and listen, like I've been saying this now for a year because I made the video a year ago. Like I did a whole thing analyzing when Pascal Ackermann got snubbed for the Tour. Was he worse in 2021 than previous years, or was his lead out regressing, Serlig and Schwarzman? And I thought it was a bit of both, but really Schwarzman was struggling. And Lotto signed those two experienced guys. They then didn't get taken to the Tour with Ewan. And then they've signed another last man in Guarnieri, who's 35. It's just kind of
Jan Swarensburg as well.
Yeah, I don't know if that was for points or just for bodies to go to classics. I don't know. But it is interesting. And also another thing to think about, like, for example, Guarnieri's 190, 80 kilos. Krieger's 184, 71 kilos. Quinton Hermans is like 176, 63 kilos. How much of a benefit, and Kluger's huge, like, I don't know, because you'd have to run a simulation maybe on a track with, like, Ewan behind Du Bois. Du Bois is a bit smaller, right? How much more does Ewan save behind a Du Bois versus a huge Guarnieri? Even if Guarnieri's not quite as good as Du Bois. I don't know. You'd have to test it.
Stupid question, perhaps. Can you test multiple riders behind each other in a wind tunnel? Or is that solely one rider?
I think you can do. They do TTTs in a wind tunnel.
Yeah, right? I think so as well.
So that's a really, really good point. Like, lead outs should be being tested in wind tunnels. You should be, before you even sign them, almost, you should be taking them to the wind tunnel and being like, and have them sit. Maybe they're already doing that, teams. I don't know. But yeah, that's a good point.
But I still think we haven't spoken that in-depthly about it. I still think the most important factor of a lead out is the adaptability and the staying cool with that adaptability during the sprint. That's what made Murku so great, that he could see a situation in live action and react to it in a good way instantly. And we saw today that he tried that. He had Mats Pedersen on the wheel on the left side of the road when it comes to us viewing it, right side for the riders. And he saw Ganna and Guarnieri going off the front and so forth and had to maneuver in between two Italian riders. And he tried to go around them to move forward. And he was kind of surprised that two Italian riders were going off at the front at the same time. And if only one went off the front, then Mats Pedersen is being brought into the perfect position by Murku here. So he adapted to that situation that is, from experience, one rider going off the front, but it was impacted by the second rider that goes off the front. So if it's a normal situation where one rider goes off the front, I'm telling you that Mats Pedersen is positioned perfectly in this sprint.
I'll give you a perfect example of Murku's genius in that vein. Stage 15 last year, Tour de France to Carcassonne. He was dropped off too early. Ballerini and Cody, it wasn't the perfect lead out. And he just waited. He's like, I'm not going. And Garcia Cortina jumped and around a sweeping left bend. And that's what he was hoping for. And then he used his elbows, bang, straight on Garcia Cortina's wheel. I now have a second last man. Use that. He came out of then Garcia Cortina's wheel at like 200 and he came second, and Cav literally just opened up the gap and maybe braked a little bit to let Cav win. And it's that sort of adaptability where you're like, if I go at 500 and do 250, Cav's not winning. And I'm also interested to see, like, Murku will, the narrative maybe always taking a step back. Like, I wonder, like, has Murku's 30-second and 1 minute and 15-second power even gone down? Or is our sprints just random and a few bad things have happened? Or I don't know. Like, maybe his power has gone down. Maybe his decisions aren't as good. It's almost impossible to know. And maybe the teams are in a good place, I think, to know, or a better place to know than than us fans, unless they publish all the data. But that was European champs. Long discussion about leadouts. I guess it was a sprint race. Jakobsen, probably best sprinter in the world, looking like at the moment. Although Ewan wasn't allowed to participate for some reason in this race, which is unfortunate.